We're now going to be talking about the Yezidi community that I'm really interested to hear from our next guest, a community very close to my heart. Nafiya Naso is an activist and healthcare professional as the lead Yezidi resettlement coordinator at Jewish Child and Family Services. She spearheaded Operation Ezra, a landmark initiative to resettle Yezidi refugees in Winnipeg. This effort stands as the largest community-organized Yezidi rescue project. Beyond her advocacy, Nafiya founded the Healing Cleansing Company, which I love this, to provide employment opportunities for Yezidi survivors, mainly young women. Since 2014, she has been a vocal advocate for Yezidi genocide awareness, lobbying the Canadian government for more robust action against their persecution. And also we have Jamileh Naso, and she is a community leader and an advocate for the Yezidi people, leveraging her personal refugee experience to mobilize support for their cause. Through her work with Operation Ezra and the Canadian Yezidi Association, she has made significant strides in awareness, resettlement, and recovery efforts in Canada. Jamileh's professional background spans in roles from Bell Canada, the RCMP's War Crime Program, and Ernst & Young, where she focused on mental health, justice, and corporate responsibility. Currently, she is pursuing an MBA with a concentration on finance and sustainability. Thank you, women. We look forward to hearing from you.
You might want to talk close to the
microphone. Okay, is that good? Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that welcome. So even just right off the bat, the first story we just heard is so similar to so many experiences of ethnic and religious minorities in Iraq. It just happens to be a different geographic location. Oftentimes, for me and for people who I talk to in the West, a lot of questions are, how did we get here? How did things get so bad? Well, it wasn't by accident, and it didn't happen overnight. The Arabization policies in Iraq, particularly under Saddam Hussein through the late 70s and early 2000s, was a government-led initiative aimed at transforming the ethnic and cultural composition of certain regions, particularly in the north, where majority of Yazidis reside, to favor Arab identity and culture over others. Minority communities like the Yazidis were made vulnerable by forced displacement and these policies. And in later years, the economic meltdown of Iraq, of course, under UN and Western sanctions, the breakdown of the state and security apparatus after the 2003 US-led invasion, and the political failures that followed, which created a perfect power vacuum for non-state actors and terrorist groups like ISIS to sweep in, spread their ideology, and ultimately in 2014 lead to a genocidal campaign against the Yazidis and other ethnic and religious minorities. In August of 2014, the world witnessed as ISIS carried out a methodically planned out genocide against the Yazidi community, abducting over 7,000 Yazidi women and girls and using children, Yazidi children, young boys, as suicide bombers and future terrorists, killing over 5,000 community members, killing them by guns, just shoot blank, burning them alive, and beheading them. Many of those videos circulated, they posted them on social media, and I'm sure many of you have seen those, and forced over 400,000 Yazidis to flee to neighboring countries, to Mount Sinjar, and even in those countries that they fled to seek refuge, they were separated from other refugee populations for their own safety. Because even in a refugee crisis in Syria and other places, Yazidis have to be kept separate from other refugee populations for their own safety. Genocide is, we say, it's not an event, it's a process. Nearly a decade later, we're seeing over 300,000 Yazidis continuing to live in internally displaced people's camps in the Kurdistan region of Iraq in inhumane conditions, lack of health services, mental health support for survivors and women who are able to escape ISIS, insufficient education and resources, little to no economic opportunities, and of course any organization who's left there, international or government, is temporary and a band-aid on the problem. And I think the most horrifying of all this is that there are still 2,700 Yazidi women and girls in ISIS captivity and missing within the region. In Sinjar region, there has been little to no reconstruction efforts. The security issues severely limit any possibility of return to the Yazidi homeland. There are daily airstrikes by Turkish forces, and there are still very active non-state actors and ISIS still in the region. And of course, the harm to Yazidi cultural and religious heritage and the destruction of sacred sites. Now, let's get into Iraq's constitution, which was established in 2005, which forms the foundation for human rights protection, including the rights of religious and ethnic minorities, which highlights really Islam at its core. Article 2 recognizes Islam as the state religion and a primary source of legislation, ensuring laws don't contradict Islamic provisions, democracy, or established rights and freedoms. But it also upholds the religious rights of all individuals to practice their beliefs and manage personal and religious affairs. But we've learned through stories on the ground and lived experience that knowing our rights and lived rights are two very different things. And there are many challenges to legal implementation of this, and several of these are, despite general protections, there's scarcity of laws addressing the unique needs of minorities such as the Yazidis, leaving gaps in protection against forced conversions, conflict-related sexual violence, and forced marriage. In a recent trip to Iraq, I had the opportunity to meet with some Iraqi officials and KRG, Kurdistan Regional Government officials, very senior level people, and they mentioned the trip that the Pope, the historic trip that the Pope made to Iraq to kind of deal and talk about some of the tensions between these communities. And, I just blurted out, I said, what about the forced disappearances or the forced conversions of Yazidis? Like, where's that issue on the table? And they said that the Pope had made a request to the most senior level, like, religious person in Iraq, and it just fell on deaf ears. There was no follow-up, there was nothing. But I was told a request was made by the Pope himself to kind of address some of these challenges, and there was nothing. So I think that says a lot about where the government's stance is. In addition to that, biases within judiciary and law enforcement affecting the fair investigation and prosecution of these crimes, in areas previously or currently under the influence of groups like ISIS. The formal legal system often clashes with tribal laws or the will of these armed groups. The significant displacement and destruction faced by minorities complicates the access to legal services. And of course, underpinning all this is the lack of trust in any legal institution in Iraq at the moment. So kind of the next landmark law that passed in March of 2021 was the Yazidi Survivors Law, which was a groundbreaking step towards justice for communities like the Yazidis. And this law was a critical measure recognizing the genocide against the Yazidis and offering support through financial compensation, reparations for survivors, rehabilitation services, housing and education, employment opportunities, and I think most importantly, memorialization efforts to honor the victims and educate future generations. But despite its passage 3 years later, we've seen many challenges with the implementation of this, including delays in bureaucratic hurdles affecting the speed and effectiveness of delivering on those promises to survivors. So maybe I'll stop there for now, and then we can continue.
So my name is Nafiya Naso, and my family and I arrived in Canada as refugees escaping the clutches of war and persecution. It was a journey marked by hope for a new beginning, away from fear and uncertainties that had colored our days. Years later, the landscape of ethnic and religious minorities back home has deteriorated, with the situation becoming increasingly dire. The summer of 2014 brought this reality into stark relief for us. It was then that the peaceful quiet of our new lives in Canada was shattered by the harrowing news from Sinjar. Phone calls and messages flooded in, painting a picture of unimaginable horror as ISIS unleashed a genocidal campaign against the Yazidi community in Iraq. Our hearts ached with every account of violence, promoting our community in Winnipeg to leap into action. we reached out to local and federal governments, community groups, and anyone who would listen in a desperate plea for help. In this dark hour, an unexpected ally emerged. The first group to extend a hand of solidarity was the Jewish community in Winnipeg, Manitoba, in Canada. This gesture of support was more than just an act of kindness. It was a bond formed through the shared understanding of suffering and the mutual desire to overcome the atrocities of the past and present. Together, we found common ground, a shared narrative of survival and resilience that transcended our different backgrounds. From this union, Operation Ezra was born in early 2015. What started as a partnership between Winnipeg's Jewish and Yezidi communities soon grew into a multi-faith coalition, a testament to the power of unity in the face of adversity. This initiative wasn't just about providing aid, it was about fostering a global community of support for the Yezidi people who had endured so much. Following closely, the Canadian Yezidi Association initiative broadened our outreach, focusing on crucial areas such as education, private sponsorship, and specialized services for trauma recovery, particularly targeting women and children who survived conflict-related sexual violence. The impact of our efforts has been profound and far-reaching. Through private sponsorship, we've successfully privately sponsored 65 Yezidi individuals to safety, with 7 more on the way, demonstrating the incredible potential of community and private sector collaboration in humanitarian efforts. Our fundraising efforts have raised well over $1.5 million, underpinning our sponsorship and family reunification initiatives, and also highlighting the generosity and the compassion of individuals moved by the Yezidi plight. We've provided support to well over 1,500 government-sponsored refugees, offering vital assistance in addressing the severe mental health challenges that many face as a result of their traumatic experience at the hands of ISIS. This support is critical in helping them adapt to find peace in their new lives in Canada. We run a food program that has successfully raised well over $140,000, ensuring that Yezidi refugees have access to the essential nutritional support they need as they settle into their new communities. We've established community integration and healing programs, including the nationally recognized Healing Farm, English as a second language programs, women's sewing programs, youth soccer programs, and many others. These initiatives go beyond mere economic integration. They are about healing, building a sense of community, and developing a sense of belonging amongst Yezidi refugees in Canada. The establishment of Canada's first Yezidi cemetery is a significant cultural contribution, providing a sacred space for the Yezidi community to honor their deceased in their new homeland. Our advisory capacity has seen us deliver hundreds of presentations to settlement agencies and organizations both within Canada and internationally, sharing key strategies for successful integration and resettlement of Yezidi refugees. And our collaboration for justice with Canada's Federal Police War Crimes Program, and supported by IRCC, the Department of Justice, and Canada's Border Service agencies, we play a pivotal role in the chronicling of the accounts of survivors. This initiative empowers the Yezidi refugees by giving them a platform to share their stories, and also contributing significantly to the global effort to hold ISIS accountable for their atrocities. Central to our mission in family reunification, time and again, in conversations with survivors, community leaders, and service providers, it's clear that reuniting families is fundamental to successful resettlement, integration, and healing. The news of a new family reunification policy in Canada aiming to reunite 400 principal applicants with their family members offers a glimmer of hope despite the ongoing struggle. Yet, there remains a critical need for more funding to expand services and enhance support mechanism for the Yazidi community. In collaboration with school divisions, healthcare professionals, financial institutions, and businesses, we understand the necessity of a holistic approach, which includes a wraparound services that are culturally appropriate to provide care that is trauma-informed. Our goal is to set survivors up for success, ensuring they not only survive, but thrive in their new home. Thank you.